Hey, so I'm going to do something a little bit different for this level. This is map 11 of Alien Vendetta, which is like a really well-known, maybe one of the most widely played Doom Megawatts, maybe the most widely played. It was released in 2002. It was organized by Anders Johnson, who's like Swedish. I think it's speedrunner. But yeah, this has probably been my favorite map from Alien Vendetta. I have like issues with some of the map design in it. Like at the time, I consider Alien Vendetta to be kind of like the Sergeant Peppers or something of like Doom mods, in that like there's some very obvious like qualities that make it interesting. And it was like kind of a big thing at the time, but it's also just kind of like not necessarily going to catch you off guard in a way that like other things are. If you go back and play like Requiem or Memento Mori, there's some kind of like bizarre odds and ends and interesting different things going on, whereas like it's kind of more streamlined by the time you get to Alien Vendetta for the most part, and there's kind of a level of detail and stuff that you expect for things. And just the way that like the enemy placement works, it's often really annoying to me. And like, yeah, this is one of the things that hopefully I'll touch on more with this video, because I really like, this video is not ideal. I took way too long to go through this level, and I really wanted to record it again, but I kind of got tired of playing through this level, to be honest. There's nothing like wrong with it per se. It's just one of those things that I think works better when you're exploring it for the first or second time, maybe, and not just like kind of playing it over and over again, because it is fairly there's some elements of it that are non-linear, but it's a fairly linear map, and the way that you kind of experience viewing this castle from a distance, this kind of like forlorn thing, that, and actually kind of getting into it, it loses some of its like, I don't know, impressiveness or feeling like the more that you play it. I guess it's true with anything else, but I don't know. I like things that increasingly, I like things that can be approached from like multiple angles, and this is one of those things that really like, oftentimes you're like fighting a monster and there'll be one that like comes up right behind you, and you have to kind of back up and fight in a particular way unless you're really like kind of coordinated, just because also there's like limited mobility in this map, and I'm playing with the pistol start. I mean, you know, I've watched some demos of this map and they do a much better job than I do, but I'm doing some kind of wimpy strats for this map, like taking out some of the chain gunners and stuff before I even got to the top of the mountain, and like just being really gradual with like how I take out the enemies, and it kind of like slows down at like the pace kind of slows down that I play it at when I get to the end, because I'm not like sure exactly what I want to do. There's a part of the map that I kind of skip because you can skip it, because I just felt like it was going on too long. But I don't know. I think the reason why this map sticks out to me is more than any other map in Alien Vendetta is it has its own mood, and it really like carries that strongly. Whereas some of the other maps of Alien Vendetta feel like they have kind of the same combat, and like you're kind of going between hallways and individual rooms, killing things, and they're always in like big groups, and like it's just like oftentimes feels like the same kind of scenarios that you like deal with, and you approach things from the same way, and you know, it's kind of like that hard, difficult kind of it's supposed to be influenced by Hell Revealed, which is another megawatt at the time. It's not like pre-Slaughter map, I guess. Slaughter map is like, oh man, I really took a hit there. Slaughter map is kind of like, the trope for Slaughter maps is that you have like a big central area where you kind of like, there are just tons and tons of guys, and you have tons and tons of ammo, and you kind of have to kind of run around and manage a huge amount of monsters. And there is actually one map called Dark Dome from Alien Vendetta that is a lot like that. And maybe some of the precursor to a lot of like slaughter maps that came after it. But that's really an outlier for the most part. Oh yeah, like Plutonia map 32 is probably like the first real example of a slaughter map that a lot of people played. It's called Go To It. But it doesn't have some of the tropes that like you see come up in like Dark Dome, where you just start in this like really big sort of hallway area, and it's really big and open, and you're just kind of like going between like a lot of different rooms. Whereas like Go To It is more kind of conventionally designed outside of the combat, which is more kind of slaughter based. So I feel like that's the thing with Alien Vendetta, is like I felt like a lot of like details that I saw playing levels in Alien Vendetta would like come up in other mods. Like it's one thing that you can definitely see like how it sort of influenced like the Doom modding that came afterwards, both in kind of positive and negative ways, I'd say. But this map kind of bears like the mark of the mod a little less. It was designed by a different designer. His name is Martin Aalen Hunsager. I assume that sounds German, but I haven't played any other of his maps. I don't even know if he's designed any other Doom maps other than the first map for Alien Vendetta and this one. And I really like the orange sky that's like in the first 11 levels of Alien Vendetta, and this really uses it kind of like Episode 4 themed. Episode 4 of the Ultimate Doom, which uses a lot of like wood, brown, and green marble textures, and has that kind of like lost or kind of forlorn quality to it, which I think this map is going for. But I think one of the problems that I have with this map is when you actually approach the castle, you're kind of taking it piece by piece, and even though the castle is actually open layout-wise, things aren't connected. Like you don't really you're not really taking them, you're kind of experiencing them separated from each other, and it feels like there's just like a lot of artificially lengthened kind of scenarios like for difficulty, where you're just kind of dealing with something multiple times just for kind of the sake of length and like epicness and things like that. And that's one of the things that like I feel like something like Doom 2 the way it did, or something like they tried to like get rid of that. I think that's like a thing at the time, is they're trying to kind of fit in as much as possible in this like vanilla Doom engine. And like the classic example of this from Alien Vendetta is the pyramid level. It's called, what's it called? I'll look it up, but which is a really interesting level in some ways, but it is one of those things where just the length and stuff is part of like the appeal of it, and I don't know, it's something that like you see or experience is just really impressive and mind-blowing when you first see it, but then it kind of like wears thin the more that you play it. No, one of the reasons why I like this map is because like I think like the mood is more sort of attached to less attached to like the kind of novelty, and there is kind of like an openness and connection between a lot of the areas, and there's a really strong like almost like story thematic feeling to it. So yeah, I don't know, like I guess my frustration comes from maybe this is one of those maps that I had sort of built up in my head as having all these like really interesting things, and then when I actually kind of deal with the combat, I realize it's a lot more clumsy than I thought, and like the way that you enter into the encounters isn't as interesting as I thought, and like some of the pretty sights aren't as like pretty as I thought that they were. I wish there was more like I'm taking this really slow, by the way. I keep jumping off so I can get like health and things like that. I wish there was more kind of going in between different like use of the caves and going in between different parts of the caves. Like you do come back to the caves at the end, and there's like some interesting encounters there, but it doesn't quite feel connected. I'd say like still more connected than a lot of other maps, but yeah, I don't know. The one part that I really like of this map is the actual use of the Cyber Demon is really interesting, because you have to enter in from this way, where there's a big pit of like lava, and you're looking straight up at the Cyber Demon. You sort of have to deal with him being there, unless you like have the means to really fight him, which like if you're playing on Pistol Start, you really don't. So he's just kind of there, and you just kind of have to circle around him, and he's not that much of a threat, but like there are points in the map where there's like a window from where the Cyber Demon is to where you are, and you really have to like be careful with how you're navigating around the spaces. Like right up through this door where the imp is to the right is one of those situations where it's kind of an interesting encounter. I'd say this is like really the most tense part of the map, and it's one of the reasons why I feel like this map goes on too long, and one of the reasons why I skipped like the last area, which is or one of the last areas, which is sort of a temple area that reminds me a little bit of that Egyptian map that comes later on in Alien Vendetta. But yeah, I don't know. This map also, I think I feel like it is kind of referencing you know, previous Doom in a way that's like you know, very sincere, and it isn't it's kind of using the mood of what's already there rather than trying to like build this kind of novel setting. So that's what I like about it. But if you look back and you look like at some of those episode 4 levels, like episode 4 level 6, which was John Romero's last level that he made. But it's also one of those green marble toxic maps, and I feel like the level of detail and the mood is actually kind of stronger than it is in this map, and that kind of comes with having to artificially lengthen a lot of things out. But yeah, like every scenario in this is like a little bit nasty. Like you have to deal with these mangubuses or mancubi, but there's this Cyber Demon to the right on the window, so you can't just stand in the doorway and shoot at them. And if you move too far up, then there's a bunch of chain gunners there, and they're really hard to take out too, because there's it feels like they intentionally put those pinkies right below them, which is really frustrating. Of course, I'm using like a mouse aim, so that makes it easier, but that's not something that you're actually supposed to do, especially because this is like a vanilla Doom megawatts. There's just a lot of scenarios where there are no kind of moments when you're safe, and you can't really use movement in the way that you could other things, because there's like hit scanners, or because like there's just like not enough space to walk around on. And I feel like that's kind of like a more of an elementary design thing, and you can see that this is in some way somebody who's like a less experienced Doom mapper. But then like just the ideas of this map and the way that things sort of connect, there's just more going on, and there's more of a story, like kind of a narrative. This is the area skip when you go through there. But there's more of a narrative going on with this map than really most Doom maps. So even if like the combat and stuff isn't as strong, I feel like it's important to highlight like, you know, maps that are like this, that are trying to do something like a little bit, I don't know, just a little bit different. I wouldn't say that this map like really sticks out as kind of conceptually more different or interesting in the way that like Bedlam, that my last video was. But like just the mood is something that really does stick with you. It's hard to describe, but it's just so much Doom. Like it feels like it kind of meshes with my experience of playing Doom and like what Doom is good at doing. Particularly like, you know, Doom Episode 4 and Doom 1, it has that stronger mood and kind of more consistent sense of place and setting. Whereas like in Doom 2, you kind of lose that for a lot of like neat design tricks and you know, some maps that are really interesting, but you don't like have that kind of sense that there's something going on behind the surface, that there's like it's hinting at something in a more subtle way that you get when you're playing, you know, Doom 1. And that's one of the problems that I have with like Doom Megawads, is even like the most consistent ones often just are like inconsistent by the nature of their construction, by the nature of having a lot of different authors, and they don't really have that same sense of like mood or whatever that the first Doom does. Like, obviously there are some Doom wads that do that, but the norm is really to follow kind of the Doom 2 structure and to have all these like kind of disparate, almost like kaleidoscopic array of experiences that you deal with. And like, that's fine, but it also can get really boring after a while, and that's why I like stuff that does try and have some sort of narrative to it. It's really hard though to stick with any sort of narrative for 32 levels. That's one of the reasons like ALT is, I keep mentioning it, and I'm going to talk about some levels from it later on. Probably like disproportionately represented in my series, but like even with 32 maps, like I feel like it could be about 20 maps long, and like that's still longer than most things, really. I feel like most Megawads, I feel, really deserve to be, but yeah, but even then it feels like, even with something that's like very consistent, it feels like you can cut about 10 of the maps out and like it would be stronger. So here I'm trying to like get the Cyber Demon to like fight the Spider Mastermind, and it's like really, I just do a really bad job. I'm like, this is where you see that I'm like not a pro Doomer at all. I'm not good at dealing with Cyber Demons, and I'm just gonna die a bunch because I'm not trying to like kill him. I'm trying to get him to fight the Spider Mastermind, which is the idea that comes from the Doom 2 level gotcha. I think it's level 20 of Doom 2, you know, where you get the Cyber Demon to fight the Spider Mastermind. And like, I guess that's like, because it's map 11, that's kind of the they didn't want you to, you know, full on have to fight the Cyber Demon like without there being some you know, a little bit of help. So that's why it's like, you know, this is being introduced. But it does remind me of the Cyber Demon at the end of episode 4 map 6, and in a lot of ways it's like very reminiscent, almost maybe a remake. Yeah, and that is one of my favorite Doom maps, so maybe I'll do a video about it. I've been meaning to finish doing videos about Doom 1, because I only got like midway through episode 2, and I feel like episode 2 and episode 3 really deserve more kind of credit than they really get from most people, and especially given that John Romero just did that playthrough of episode 1, and like I feel like it makes my videos that I did like pretty redundant. But yeah, the thing that I like about that map in comparison to this one is that there's like a really big kind of central area that everything revolves around, and you kind of keep coming back to it. And I do think I like the way that the kind of spatial relationship works. Like, you circle on back to an earlier area where you pick up the rocket launcher. Originally, when I picked up the yellow key, and I like that kind of exploring that spatial relationship, and I think it does it well in some ways. And like there is this kind of an openness, but it's also gated off in a lot of ways. But yeah, I don't know. I do like that when you enter in, you kind of enter from the butt area of it. Like, speaking of butts, the Cyber Demon is just like stuck on a ledge here, so he gets killed first. I guess this happens sometimes. I pushed him down with the BFG, so he's probably not supposed to be there. But yeah, I like that you enter from that kind of toxic pit area, and that there are like different ways of kind of different doorways that you kind of exit out. You can exit out behind the Cyber Demon, or you can exit out to the left in that area where I first got that secret. And so you can approach it from different ways, but like, and like, you know, with a Megawad that does have like some kinds of gated progression, it's nice to have an area that is very big thematically, but that you can come at from different ways. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like trying to kind of accurately convey how this felt when I first played Alien Vendetta, because I wasn't really thinking about any of those things. This was really the first big Megawad that I played, and you know, I was really bad at it. I played it on Ultra Violence, and I saved and reloaded a bunch of times, and you know, that's just, you know, that's just kind of what I expected. That was kind of the norm. And at the time, I really felt like a lot of maps maybe had memorable encounters that I still think about, but there just wasn't a sense of like that I had really kind of been through something when I finished them. It was just this very like intuitive sense that that there was something going on behind the surface, and I wasn't just kind of playing a Doom map where I was just doing one thing and then doing another thing. And this was the first map, and maybe one of the only maps that I really got that sense that like there's something else going on here. This really feels like something different. It's not just like one thing, but you're kind of exploring a bunch of different aspects of something, and it's like it wants to tell you something. And like a lot of just level design and just game design that I really like has that feeling to it, where it goes beyond that sort of mechanical interestingness into some sort of narrative context where there's something like slightly interesting or subversive being done, and the way that you kind of approach things kind of defamiliarizes your relationship with it. And this is one of those things. It's almost like a short story or something, this whole map. You know, you start out at the bottom looking from this boat, looking from the island from afar, and then you come and you're sort of in the island and in the depths of it. But even when you're finished, you have to kind of explore the sides of these caves and see how it connects back to where you came from. So you're coming to this like forlorn, like lost island that has its own kind of rules and values to it, and it's kind of like its own little self-contained experience. Once you finish, you've escaped, and that's it. And like, I don't know if I would have like designed it in this way, but like just the fact that there's kind of an idea or a feeling, and there are different things going on. It isn't just about like one gameplay concept. I guess that's what like I really respond to. But yeah, it's often really hard to put into words, and I think like I would always be really frustrated when I was younger, because there were some things that I just like unequivocally just really have a visceral immediate reaction, like I like this and I don't really know why, and and oftentimes it would not be what other people said that they liked. And I still have that problem where I like go on to like Doom World or something and I read like recommendations of maps and I'm like, you know, I really want to kind of trust people's opinion and what's interesting about it, and you know, that them being an authority of what's interesting, but I often find that I just completely disagree, or like I just don't see the same things that other people see. And I think that is one of those just things about everyone has their own favorite, everyone has their own kind of favorite things, and they have their own, they're coming in with their own kind of, you know, preconceptions and things that they kind of like to experience. But I don't know, it's always sad to me that to feel oftentimes like the kind of perspective and experiences that I value aren't really reflected by most things, and then when there's that one thing that comes out that I just feel so strongly like attached to and defensive of, that it can be hard to explain to other people like why it isn't just like all relative, why there's something kind of magical and special about this particular thing. That's been so hard with like ALT. Like I don't know exactly. I mean, I can express why I think it's a really interesting piece of work, and why I think it's like why it stands out to me more than other things, but still there is this kind of like frustration of trying just really hard to communicate why I think this is different from something else, and really trying to draw attention to that and respect that. And I often feel like a lot of people just see it like as being the same as something else, like it's all relative. There isn't that magic or whatever, is just so hard to kind of communicate. And I think this map does have that, and it comes from something more internal, like inside, that there's just this kind of intangible thing that you're trying to express that comes out in some way, in like the structure or the progression of the thing that you're designing. And I feel like you can see when things are clicking and when they're not. When someone is trying to force an environment or explore a concept, and when there's some kind of like weird mystical magical thing going on, and it's so hard to like, it's something that a lot of people might even laugh at, but it's definitely there, and it's so hard to kind of convey what exactly that is and how you quantify that. People in game culture are so obsessed with like quantification and measuring things in these like really obvious and like just, I don't know, like I was just watching a video today where he was talking about the older Zelda games and like what's good design and what's bad design, and I don't know, I think it's like it goes beyond that. It goes beyond just like how you instruct the player. It goes beyond that kind of stuff. There's something else that comes kind of to the surface. Oh, by the way, I decided to exit like while still shooting the guys for style points. But yeah, I don't know. I hope that I conveyed that anyway with this, and you know, that's something that I try to do with my Doom mixtape videos, so I hope you like it. My Twitter is @ELLAGURO, and I'll continue this discussion later, but yeah. Anyway, have a good night.